Ladies and gentlemen, the Shred Gaming Telecom video, we're going to be running through the $1,000 to $1,300 gaming PC. Around a week ago now, we of course were targeting $650 systems, and now we have one that's $900 plus all the way to just under $1,300. So this system is targeted, of course, towards gaming primarily. We don't have quite enough in our budget to go with the, say, GTX Titan or the new released R9 290X. By the way, there is a complete list of all the components as well as links and so on to them in the description, so you can just click on that and you can just follow along, or you can watch this video and you can have the reasoning behind them. So anyway, I have selected the Intel Core i5 4670K. I'm not going to bother to repeat everything because, as I said, it is in the link in the description. This is going to cost you about $220. Now, this is the K derivative, which means, of course, that it is easy to overclock. We'll go into the cooler situation in a moment. Honestly speaking, you could go with AMD. It's a pretty decent option. You could go with, say, AMD and a better graphics card than what we managed to fit into our budget here, but I think that for most games now, you're probably going to find that Intel, at least for the foreseeable future, are going to provide better options. There is no hyper-threading on this system. Of course, in the future, you could always put in our i7, but for right now, I don't really think it's going to be that worth it. It's going to cost about just over $100 extra as well for the i7, so it's really not worth trying to squeeze it into our particular budget, although you could always do so if you so desire. There are a couple of motherboards on offer. The first is the Asus Z87K LGA 1150. That's going to cost you $115 US. And as you'd expect, does come with USB 3 as well as PCIe 3. If, however, you want a more prominent graphics solution, perhaps in the future, in other words, you want to go with, say, SLI, then I'd recommend the Gigabyte Z87LGA 1150 two-way SLI. As for RAM, excuse me, there's a couple of options. The first is Kingston HyperX Blue, that is spelled BLU. 8 gigs, I would personally not recommend going anything less than that in this day and age. Or the second option is Corsair Vengeance 8GB DDR3 1866. Now they're going to cost you $80 for the Kingston or $98 for the Corsair. Honestly speaking, I think the Kingston Blue would probably do for most people, but it's only a few extra dollars, so you could always go for it. Graphics card solutions are a little bit more complicated. As you'd expect, you've got the AMD Radeon. I've gone with the Gigabyte model simply because it seems to be one of the cheaper ones. R9 280X, that gives you GDDR5 memory of 3 gigs. That's going to cost you $300 US, or you can go for the EVGA GTX 770, and that's the superclocked edition. That's going to cost you $400. So obviously there's a bit of a price jump there. Now I'm going to be honest with you that in our budget there's not quite enough to go for the R9 290X. Perhaps this will change in a month or two, where prices start falling, but from what I'm looking at right this second, the prices are at a slight premium. So you're looking at $500 plus. That doesn't mean that that's going to maintain that, but for right now. So you've got kind of a choice. You can either go with the GTX 770 or you can cough up the extra for NVIDIA. My personal thoughts on this are it really depends on the game you're playing. However, unless you really like hardware physics, which I actually really do, I would be hard-pressed to pay the extra $100 to go for the NVIDIA card. I'll just be completely and utterly honest. That said, of course, you could always go like SLI later down the road. I would personally be tempted with the AMD card, however. But I know some of you guys prefer NVIDIA for whatever reason, and so there you have it. As for hard drives, well, I've decided to give you guys a couple of options here. You've got the WD Blue 1 TB hard drive, that's 7200 RPM. That's SATA 6 gigabytes per second, of course, which of course the motherboard will also fully support. That's going to cost you about 65 US dollars. But I realize many of you are also interested in SSDs, particularly for your operating systems. And so a second optional system is the Samsung SSD 840 Evo series. That's 120 gigabytes. That's going to cost you just 1 cent under $100. I've not selected a case because I find that cases are a personal choice, and whenever I've recommended cases in the past, very few people actually really care about them. So I'd recommend just looking at some good cases. Everyone has personal preferences. Some people, really care about how quiet it is. Other people really care about how easy it is to expand. Other people are focused on things such as water cooling. Others care about the size and whether they want it to be pretty small. So I'd suggest you just look around on a couple of forums, or just do a bit of Googling, or even just go into your local hardware store and just ask them what they think is a good case. Personally, I don't do any of those things. Personally, I just look at a couple of nice looking cases online, do a quick review, and just go to a website, have a quick look at it from the inside, and that's about it. I'll just be honest, I'm not one of those people that fusses too much on the case, but that is just my personal opinion. Obviously, your mileage may vary. As for the power supply, you can go for a Corsair Enthusiast series. That's a 650 watt 80 PSU, and you're looking at 90 US dollars. Obviously, if you're intending to go high-end SLI in the future, or with tons of hard drives and whatever, then you could possibly go for higher-end wattage, but for now that'll probably be okay. DVD burner. Well, pretty much anything on the planet, let's be honest. Now, who the hell cares that DVD burners are pretty much end of the line in terms of technology? I understand some people may care about Blu-rays or whatever, but you could fit that into your budgets should you so desire. Personally, I'd throw in any old OEM drive. I usually go with like the shop's own brand piece of crap. It just does the job. It doesn't have to be particularly pretty. I just use it basically to install my Windows, and that's pretty much the end of it. Anyway, finally, CPU cooler. Now, if you're not planning to do huge amounts of overclocking, I would say the retail is probably okay. But if you are planning to overclock quite substantially, or you're planning to overclock and you live in a hot climate, for example, I live in the UK, so it's not too much of a big deal. Even in summer, it's acceptable-ish. But if I'm going really high overclock, so I did live in a hot climate, I would, however, recommend the Corsair Hydro Liquid CPU cooler. The H60 would cost about 60 US dollars. So in case you're wondering about the price point, if you go with the very basic options, the very basic options, which would be the i5, the Asus motherboard, the Kingston Hyperblue, Radeon graphics card, the hard drive without the SSD, a $50 case, the PSU, and a basic $15 DVD burner, you're going to be looking at around 935 US dollars. Obviously, prices vary every day. On the other hand, if you always want the most expensive parts, for example, the GTX, you want the SSD, the more expensive RAM, and the more expensive motherboard, you're looking at 1,227 US dollars. So it's not too shabby, actually. I know some people are going to be asking, is it worth the extra over the previous system, the 650 to 850 US dollar one? Honestly speaking, there are some parts on that system that are very good, but this one primarily throws most of the cash into the Intel processor and motherboard, which are slightly more expensive than the other system. Graphics wise, it's slightly better, not hugely, but there you have it. As I said, personally, if it were me, I would go for the basic motherboard, and I would go with the Radeon graphics card. But that's just me. I understand some people would prefer the NVIDIA. I personally do prefer NVIDIA, but I don't really know in this case if the $100 extra is worth it. As I said, all of this is in the description, so you can check it out as an article. Anyway, I'll see you soon. Take care, and bye for now, my good friends.